What I want people to feel when they leave Downstream, and you want this with all the Novara stuff really, is to feel a bit more optimistic. Not everything is dreadful or awful or bad news. Not everything's a catastrophe. There's lots of stuff to be positive about, to be excited about, to be intrigued about, because that's the world. The world is very exciting and intriguing.
Can you, whose idea was Downstream? How did it come to be?
So like Downstream started during lockdown where none of us could be in the studio and couldn't work face to face.
We use Zoom for the first time, but in a way, counterintuitively, that means you can talk to more people, have a wider variety of conversations. All of a sudden, space doesn't matter.
So the first one that I did was Naomi Klein. And then we kind of realized that we did have all of these interviews which weren't what you would think of as like a typical Novara interview. Like it wasn't straight politics, but it was interesting and we wanted to do more of it. And there were two interviews in particular. One was with the director, Spike Lee. It was not the film that I expected in lots of ways. And another was with the musician and author Akala.
There's nothing wrong with people respecting the building of the NHS and the building of the welfare state, but that does have to come in context of the history of the British Empire.
So for me, Downstream is almost like a curriculum. I would want it to be this amazing interview series with the world's most important thinkers, offering some of the most original insights. And even if you don't agree with 70% of what they're saying, there's still a hell of a lot for you to take away. That to me is the best kind of media out there. I would say that it's a very important corrective psychologically as well. If you're attached into the news cycle, you're in the sort of the doom scrolling mood, which all of us can succumb to, a really good way to get out of that is to listen to a really interesting conversation between two people. Get away from the doom scrolling, think about the big ideas, get excited about the possibilities of politics, economics and culture, and that will possibly recalibrate how you view things. And I don't want just socialists to be thinking that. I want conservatives, liberals, or none of the above to be thinking that too.
So I actually think the pluralism of Downstream is a bit different from the pluralism of the organisation, because the pluralism of the organisation is what are the kinds of editorial frameworks and understandings that we want to have. So we're not so pluralistic that we'd go, yeah, let's commission this the way the Telegraph or the Spectator would. That's not what we're interested in doing. We're talking about a kind of left pluralism where the political composition of the organisation goes from like anarchists and communists to people who are social democrats. And within that, there's obviously a whole load of variety as well. So it's about creating a space where all the different ways someone who is broadly left-wing might think about something can be represented. And that's different from Downstream because I do actually want people who are right-wing to come on the show and talk to me, because there's no one on this planet who I'm not interested in. And that's not the same as going, I'm going to platform you because I think you deserve to be celebrated and validated. It's saying that you're a subject that's worthy of analysis in some way.
Who's ready to shoot fucking Downstream?
What does like a Downstream day, week look like?
It starts with either me saying to Jonah, I want to interview this person, or Jonah being like, have you heard of this person? And me going, no. And then Jonah being like, but they're actually interesting. And I'm like, okay. So first you sort of decide on the person, and that can sometimes be months in advance because you're trying to catch people when they're on book tour, or they happen to be in the UK, or they've got very busy diaries. So the process starts long before you get to the point of like going through all their interviews and like reading their book or whatever else it is. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing that happens is I try and come up with the framing of the interview. I watch and read interviews with that person. If they've got written work, I read it, and then you try and come up with like a through line or a shape. And that's also a process that Jonah, who's our producer, who's staring at me now from this corner of the room, does an awful lot of as well, particularly if there's a book, because then there's the division of labour where I focus on the book and the Blair Witch Project over there focuses on the material that's come from other media work that they've done.
And did you read through the questions?
I did. Let me.
Because Gary was saying like maybe more of an enhanced Palestine section, but I want to keep it quite tight to the conversation about racism.
We had an opportunity to talk about the vote
Yeah.
and how she felt.
Oh, that's good. Do you want to just sort of like write, because there is a ceasefire question in there.
Most of the people who interview you in legacy media don't read your book. They don't bother. Or if there is somebody reading it, it's not the person who's talking to you, it's their researcher and they send them some bullet points.
I mean, that is funny. So when guests will come in, they'll be like, oh my God, you've read the book. Or they'll say to me, like, have you read the book? And I'm like, yes, I have read the book, because it would be insanity if I didn't. And a lot of journalists don't read the book of the person that they're interviewing about a book, which I just think is like a basic dereliction of duty. I'm really fast at reading. I'm like mad fast at reading. I can do like a book a day on holiday.
What? How many pages?
So one of the books that I read on holiday, page length? Okay, I read the 640 page book in a day.
What?
On holiday.
Massive type.
Why is it called Downstream?
It was Gary, who's our head of video, who came up with the title.
Because politics is downstream from culture.
Where does that come from?
It comes from Andrew Breitbart.
Oh, is it a quote?
That's a very right-wing quote.
Oh my God, is it?
Yeah, but it's something that people on the right, I think, get right, which is that, the politics of today, the political choices, the political possibilities, the inevitabilities, or what we would on the left call ideology, that is an outgrowth of culture. And I say we've got it from the right, but actually they got it from the left. They got it from people like Antonio Gramsci, the Frankfurt School, which is to say you can reorient the parameters of the cultural conversation, and that has a knock-on effect to politics. So the idea of politics being downstream from culture, I just said it's from the right. Originally they pinched it from us. We're pinching it back, but that's where it comes from.
Like, a lot of people would probably think that interviewing Zara Sultana would be really different from interviewing Rory Stewart, but actually it wasn't. And it's not because of their politics, it's because they're both politicians. So you're trying to do the same thing, which is get in under someone's guard and build rapport, which means that they feel comfortable saying things to you that they wouldn't necessarily say to other interviewers.
If you honestly said to me, would I rather be Prime Minister or would I rather be presenting a podcast, I would rather be Prime Minister.
Now, how you do that with each individual will be different. For Zara Sultana, it was very much about going, I think I understand you as a person because we're both women of colour and we're both Muslim and we're both on the left. With Rory Stewart, obviously I can't be like, I also went to Eton. I was also made the governor of a small Iraqi province by the age of 30. There is no overlap in life experience, but you can build that rapport by just leading with your sincerity and going, I'm not trying to fuck you over, I'm trying to take your ideas seriously, and I've read your book and I've given it the attention that it deserves, and I want to get into the depth of it and not just do a surface level reading. And both those things are doing the same thing, which is trying to build enough trust with someone that they feel able to open up with you a bit.
So when we look for guests for the show, we are looking for three things: thoughtfulness, originality, and really making arguments that matter. We don't want to talk about puerile, stupid things. There's so much of that elsewhere. We want to talk about important things in new, original ways with people who know what they're talking about.
The problem was they didn't replace the homes that were being sold, and they didn't put the money back into councils building new homes.
Now that should sound quite straightforward. That should sound like, that's the secret sauce of good interviews, but actually that's quite rare. That is quite rare. That's not that usual. And when you get that combination, it's a winning combination. So some of the guests we've had, Gary Stevenson, talking about finance, his story.
I'm really excited by this. Me too.
Did tremendously well because people hadn't heard those kind of arguments being made before.
In my opinion, the reason that this multiple has become so big is because the rich are so fucking rich now. And these guys buy assets.
Or when we speak to Yanis Varoufakis about techno-feudalism, you know, they hadn't heard that argument being made in that way. They might know some of the phenomena he's talking about, you know, digital giants, decline of the high street, I can't buy a house, I'm renting, make sense of this. And then this really smart economist comes along and says, well, you might not agree with all of it, but I've got an integrated explanation for most of these things that intuitively anger you. I'm equipping you with sort of an intellectual skill set to do something about it.
Why do you think the euro never competed with the dollar for supremacy? Because the German capitalists would hate that.
Okay, so thinking about your ambitions for Downstream then, do you have any? And if so, like, where do you want the show to go?
So there's people where maybe I don't want to read their book in a day. I want to really spend time with it. I want to be able to like war game it and rehearse it and just drill myself over and over and over, so you can get this really great set piece, like the definitive interview with this person.
We want to create with each person we speak to the best interview available of them online. So Yanis Varoufakis or Zizek or Vicky Spratt or Lea Erpi or Hassan Piker, whoever. If it's not the best interview that you can find on YouTube with them, we have failed.
Yeah, if you want to put together a broad coalition of like left and center on politics, you're gonna have to lean on genuine momentum from the left.
Do you know something? The person to talk to about ambition is always Aaron, because it is his delusion that brought us here as an organisation. Every time you talk to Aaron about like, where do you see us being in like 2 years or 5 years, he says something which is completely absurd, but also kind of inspiring and in its own way achievable.
We want Downstream to be the best interview show on YouTube in the English-speaking world. Now that's very, very hard. We might not get there. There's lots of competition, particularly across the water in the US. But I have to say, you know, if you look at the direction of travel really in the last year, I think it's really positive.
Even the idea of like having an office, when we started Novara Media, we'd be like, whoa, Nelly, steady on. But he was just like, no, we're gonna do this and we're gonna professionalize. You know, I remember him saying like, we're gonna outlast BuzzFeed right at the beginning. And I was like, crazy. They've got that venture capital, we don't. He's like, precisely. And he was fucking right.
The funny thing with Downstream is we have the guests come in, you know, Francis Fukuyama or whoever, and they're shocked. They are genuinely shocked at what Novara's produced, because they go, wait, you're socialists? You're communists? You're on the left? Nobody gave you any money to start any of this? You've got no seed capital, no venture capital? No, not a penny. Nobody gave us a single penny of investment, which had to be paid back. And they are stunned. You know, they do their press junkets with publishers or whoever. They come to us and they say, this is Channel 4. And then they say, well, actually on YouTube, this might get more views than Channel 4. They're shocked. And I think that is a really nice thing. It reflects incredibly well on my colleagues because they're brilliant, talented people. It reflects really well on our supporters because they're part of a project which is stupefying. I think we can produce, I think we already are producing, far better work than they produce in legacy media with a fraction of the resources, a fraction.